Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together.
All right, so I'm sitting here and I'm talking to Lorelle Sherman. And Lorelle, would you like to go and introduce yourself to everybody listening?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I am a forest ecologist, a mushroom enthusiast, a bird nerd. I grew up in Pennsylvania and I've been a bird nerd since I was a little girl. And so that means that I was spending a lot of time in the woods. And, when you're out in the woods for hours and hours and days, you start to notice everything else around you. So I started getting into plants and trees and wildflowers and insects. And eventually it led me to mushrooms. And I now do mushroom and foraging forays. I teach classes and workshops on plant identification, bird identification, and just really trying to inspire folks to rebuild a connection, relearn what it is to be a human in nature, get re-inspired by our outdoor surroundings. Currently working as a forest ecologist in Oregon, and I work with looking at the forest response to thinning and fuels reductions treatments out here, which is largely driven by all the big wildfires we've been having recently.
Fuel reduction, so reduction of stuff on the ground that would continue to burn or whatever for spread of wildfires.
Yeah, so essentially fuel reduction could mean mastication, slash pile burning, prescribed burning. It's kind of a band-aid to the fire suppression issue out here. We've been suppressing fire for decades, and so that's led to a buildup of woody debris in the landscape, an unnaturally large amount of woody debris because our forests are denser than they have been prior to Euro-American colonization. And so fuels reductions is just a way to try to reduce the fuels on the landscape back to a more, I don't know, sustainable level. It's a controversial topic out here. So I'm watching how I say these words. But the main goal is to slow the spread of fire and to reduce the intensity of wildfire such that it doesn't become these catastrophic major events that burn towns down out here like we've been hearing in the news.
Yeah. Fire is super beneficial to the landscape as well, though. So, is that, an argument that a lot of people are putting forth on that?
So yeah, it's so fire is definitely a part of our landscape, and I don't think anybody is arguing that we shouldn't have fire. Well, actually, there are people that are arguing that, like you're saying, which is kind of part of the problem. Really, there's a lot of education that needs to happen in these Western states. People don't like to deal with toxic smoke for days on end, right? So in Oak Ridge, Oregon, the Cedar Creek fire has led to toxic air quality for almost a month. And if you're living in that, yeah, you're like, I don't want fire around me ever. But the reality of the situation is that our forests are, even our wildlife they've evolved to have wildfire and they require it. And we kind of have to learn how to live with it and deal with it in a way that is less catastrophic to human lives. So we shouldn't, we don't want to get rid of it, but we need to learn how to live with it better than we have been in the past 100 years.
I say hell with the humans, but I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned was you were a bird nerd. So, I mean, like birder or like pet hoarder, all of the above? Like, how did the passion start and what did it grow into before, you decided to maybe start learning more about them and then realize there's these other things? Or was it, I mean, growing up, did you want to actually be an ornithologist, or what was the path there?
Oh man, yeah. So I was very allergic to dogs and cats when I was young, but I love animals so much. And so my family had pet birds. So we had several different species of conures and, of course, like the little parakeets and whatnot. And I had a subscription to Bird Talk magazine.
I may have too.
Really?
Yes.
You did?
I did. And I had a pet love bird, and it was teal, and I named it Tealy. And that bird lived, oh gosh, 25 years, something like that. And then I think the only reason it actually died is my niece was playing with it, and she was young, and she might have been a little too rough and hurt it. But unfortunately, But Tealy lived a long, long time, long after I moved out of the house. So, yeah.
I actually my dad is still watching my pet cockatiel from when I lived at home because nobody realized that birds live so long.
Long time. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so funny that you know what Bird Talk magazine is, though. That means that you're a bird also.
Now it's changed. It's a little bit different. I don't have any pet birds in the house. My grandma always had like parakeets and things like that when I was a kid. So it was always cool to like go over there and play with all of her birds. Those you couldn't really let out of the cage, but Tealy, I'd be doing my homework, and he, I think, actually would chase my pencil around and bite the eraser while I'm trying to write all the time. It was pretty cool. He'd never poop on my shoulder. He'd always fly off, sometimes poop on my homework. But
that's lucky.
Yeah, well, we had him trained. Like you'd actually be like, no. And then he learned from just doing that, like tapping him and saying no, that he would fly off and poop on the table or whatever. But yeah, he wouldn't poop on you.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I definitely had a couple of well-trained birds, but some not well-trained birds mixed in there too.
Yeah. My mom's friend, had a terribly mean bird. I can't even remember its name, but I hated that thing. It was a golden lory. Big, big old parrot of some sort. And that thing was just mean. You walk by and it'd yell at you. I think it was a golden lory. And then she had like a red macaw, which was okay bird. But yeah, she had some big birds too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know Bird Talk. Cool. It's changed though.
So Bird Talk magazine. That's funny that we can connect on that random information.
So now it's not Bird Talk magazine, but I do have a backyard flock, couple geese, which are actually going to get processed here because my wife does not want them around on the porch anymore making messes. So yeah, we're going to eat those. That was kind of the plan anyway, but I got attached to them and my wife didn't. Turkeys sometimes, and then a lot of layers, and then we raise meat birds every year as well. It's mostly Cornish crosses, but I think I'm going to switch to some type of heritage breed that's smarter and able to just free range, because that's what I want ultimately. Yeah.
Do you know what you're gonna do with the geese? Do you have any, special
one I'm going to them? For the preparation, like cooking them. Like I know that I'm going to take one and process it and probably break it down, and the other one I may leave whole. But as far as what I'm going to cook, like I might do like a traditional Christmas goose.
Ooh.
With the one that I leave whole, and just kind of hopefully put it in the oven and baste it an awful lot and just get super crispy, golden skin on it. That's the goal there. The turkey, unfortunately, one of mine just got hit in the road. The neighbor kid told me all about it. He's like, yeah, I watched this kid. He was on his cell phone the whole time. We were yelling and screaming and waving our arms. And he finally looks up and bam, smacks it. And that bird was probably 30-pound turkey. I mean, it was big.
Bummer.
It was a big one. But he goes, it messed up his car, and then he got scared and he just kept going. So good for him. That's what he deserves. The guy wasn't even looking.
Can you not salvage anything from that?
No, it was
a mess.
A mess. He goes, I took and threw it in the ditch, and the coyotes to take care of what was there when I came home. And it was feathers and mess. The only thing that was still there was like feet in the road. It was bad. It was a bad. I mean, the kid smoked it. He was probably doing like 60 or 70. I live on a very rural road, and it happens to be one of the tar and chip roads that's almost as smooth as blacktop. So the cars that go down here tend to go pretty fast because it bridges between a county highway and something else. So, but other than that, it's pretty rural. But yeah, the kid was not paying attention at all.
You didn't take the old lucky turkey feet home with you?
No, I didn't.
Oh, that's bummer.
Yeah, and the only other time I've ever had birds actually get hit was my guinea hens. And what was crazy is there was one out of the 10. The guy, and I'm pretty sure the guy actually swerved, because a guy I know told me, he's like, I think the guy swerved just to hit him. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. But 10 guinea fowl, all wiped out, completely smashed, gone, nothing salvageable. And one that wouldn't come back home, and I couldn't catch it. Oh. That stayed with all of the other ones, and I'm sure a coyote had to have gotten it at night. But yeah, that's the only birds I've ever lost like that to the road. So that's pretty good in 8 years. So, but
8 years, that is pretty good actually.
Yeah. Now predators, on the other hand, I've actually had eagles come and take birds. So that's
whole guinea hens, or what is the largest bird you've seen a predatory bird take?
A turkey.
Okay, that's big. I've been curious about that.
So bald eagle, turkey, juvenile turkey, so maybe 10, 12 pounds, but still large bird, came down, ripped the entire breast out of it, and flew off.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's massive bird. And I know where the nest is. I've seen the nest, and it's like crazy how big the nest where that one came from. And then now, since then, their little eaglets have made a nest like, I don't know, less than a quarter mile away from the house. But the first time I heard the eagle, I was mowing the grass, and it sounded like a little girl like screaming. It startled me. And this is from a lawnmower. I hear this, and I'm like, oh, somebody's in trouble. And at the time, I didn't even have kids. I thought it was like somebody in my creek drowning. So I stopped the mower, I shut it off, and then I hear it, and I'm like, no. And out comes this eagle out of the creek bed. And it was echoing through the creek bed, the screech. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And I was like, that's so cool. That's the closest eagle encounter I've ever had.
Yeah. And then I love in car commercials how they have to dub in like a red-tailed hawk call, because the bald eagle call is so like you're describing it like a little girl screaming, which is not very powerful, for a car commercial or something. But
yeah, it was crazy. It was pretty cool though. But yeah, so that was my eagle experience. And then shortly after, it started killing birds and turkeys. And I was like, oh, come on, man, leave me alone. But since then, I haven't had too many problems with it. The chickens have gotten smarter, and they start hiding a little better. Yeah. They see that shadow. It's funny, though, if they see a shadow of like hawks, how quickly they duck down and go underneath something.
Yeah. So when you say you want to get a heritage breed because they're smarter, is that related to their response to predators and survival?
Yes, because a Cornish cross does not care about anything but eating. They are crazy. Like, if you picture the cartoons when we were kids and Baby Huey, like, that is a Cornish cross variety. You have to take feet away from them or they will eat themselves to death.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So, like, remember the BK broiler commercial?
Yeah.
Okay. That BK broiler bird is the bird that's a Cornish cross. And they get that big to where it can barely walk. They waddle. It's almost gross, really.
Yeah, it's sad. It's a sad
situation, right? I don't ever let them get to that point. Normally, like, they say 8-9 weeks. I take them to about 7. Then you have a young, more tender bird. Because, I don't know, I just find that the muscle grows too fast, and there's a certain point to where it's kind of gross. So we like them at about 7 weeks, which is a little bit better than the 8-9. But then you actually start having heart failure and things like that at like 9 weeks anyway. So it's
Yeah,
crazy.
and it doesn't feel good to eat something like that. I
Right,
mean, it's the same as commercially raised chicken or whatever. It just doesn't feel right or
right.
good. If
I mean, I pasture them, and it's not like, or at least I don't believe, I believe they're just bred to that. Like they're not genetically modified, but,
yeah,
um, and we pasture them and try and give them just, make it a humane life and all these different things to it. But at the same time, it's like, they're dumb. They're super dumb birds, and all they do is just have a voracious appetite. And so I told my wife, I'm like, I really want to just raise ones where we're able to just free range them and they're smart enough to not just stand there and eat when something's going to come up and eat it. So looking
yeah.
into that, there's a few out there, I think. So we're going to see next year. And it's a longer process. You're talking like 14 weeks at that point versus, 7 or 9. But
Right. But to some extent, that just we've moved so far away from what is natural in terms
right.
of the bird life cycle that, you're like, oh, 14 weeks, that's so long. But that's really, we've shifted our baseline
Yeah.
thing unnatural, and really probably like 14 weeks is what it should be. And we
Yes.
just need to be more patient.
Yes. Yeah. And not feed them certain things like some companies do. Like
Right. Yeah.
Tyson
Yeah.
feeding them arsenic and then putting it on
Oh,
rice crops, and then they wonder why there's rice with arsenic in it. But that's a different
yeah.
story. Yeah, we could
There's
go on and on
all
about
kinds of
agriculture,
messed
but
up avenues to
yeah.
go down.
But anyway, let's talk about. Um, so we got so sidetracked here,
I know.
but
Yeah, I mean, we just got right into it. So back to the bird thing. I had these pet birds, and I kind of like I grew up in a city, and I would run away a lot. And I'd run away to these local city parks and just sit and stare at the tree canopies and look at the birds. And I started noticing the bird song. And my mom actually always says that I was born with this bird nerdism. And yeah, my grandpa got me my first pair of binoculars when I was 10 years old. And I've just forever been extremely intrigued and fascinated by birds and made it into my career almost. I've had multiple jobs that are just about bird research. So um, yeah, it's almost like it's been a part of me. And there's not one moment that happened that I became a bird lover, but it's just been a part of me.
so my wife's uncle is an ornithologist.
Oh,
So
cool.
it was his passion, and his dad loved bird watching, and it was something that they shared, and it ended up becoming a career for him. So it's pretty cool. Yeah,
Yeah, bird nerds have a way of just figuring out how to keep that in their lives, whether it be people who do like big years or people who do it for research or whatever. It's people get really obsessed with birds. It's kind of funny.
yeah. And what's crazy is her grandfather would always carve wood carvings, and their house had so many birds in it. And so when he passed, there were certain ones, and of course, he knew every single species of what was carved, but he'd be like, "Oh no, this one's super special." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that's awesome." Like what
Special
it's
because
cool.
of the species or because of like the wood carving aspect of
I
it.
think both, like
Yeah.
that it was probably something that he shared, but he'd go around and he'd tell me like every single species of what they were in the carvings and stuff. I think we might have like one or two, but
Oh, cool.
yeah. So anyway, back to you. So loved birds, had a few jobs, and then, but like you said, spending time in nature, you started realizing all of these other things. When did like the foraging aspect come into play? Was that something that was always there, even as a child, or was it, hey, I went to college, took some botany courses, and then it really sparked a fire?
Yeah, I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, close to West Virginia, where morel hunting, chanterelle hunting is kind of just a way of life.
Huh.
And it was in the background of my life when I was younger. People weren't like, we're mushroom hunters. It was just, families go out and pick morels every spring, and chanterelles in the fall, and that's, nobody talks about it. And it wasn't until when I went to college at the University of Vermont, there was a naturalist program there, and I attended some free community walks with some of these PhD naturalist students that had to do this for their degree, and started learning about the medicinal properties, the ethnobotany side of what's out there, and started looking at it in a little bit of a different way. But then moving to Oregon really kind of launched my view of mushroom hunting specifically into something that is, I mean, because it's the Pacific Northwest, right?
It's the
just
greatest.
Like,
I mean,
the mecca of mushroom hunting.
Yeah.
And I know the Midwest is great too for mushroom hunting.
It's still not the same.
It's such a different atmosphere out here, and I just, deep dived into it. But it's always been there in my life, never a major part, just kind of in the background. And then I met some people who were really enthusiastic about it, and that was infectious. And I just, all of a sudden, I've been here for 8 years, and 8 years later, here we are talking on this podcast. So yeah, it's funny how that happens.
That's awesome. That's cool though. So then, like, you learned the medicinal side, and then was there any point where you decided to like start utilizing all these different plants and the medicinal properties of them and things like that, or was it just something that you learned?
So I definitely dabble a bit in the medicinal side of plants and mushrooms, but I wouldn't call myself an herbalist or somebody that I don't feel comfortable teaching. There's so many other people out there that have such deeper connection and knowledge of that I do make tinctures with medicinal mushrooms, and I take stinging nettle seed tincture every day. And my friends make tinctures, and we trade and whatnot. But I personally just dabble in that in my own realm and don't really teach that at all. I don't feel like that's my role. I stick to more of like the what can you eat, but also the ecology of it and how does it fit in with the ecosystem. And I like existing in the realm where it's broader. How are these, what is the impact of us doing this? What is the connection of these mushrooms to these trees? Just like taking many steps back. But I do personally,
right? Yeah, I don't teach herbalism on here. I don't really teach anything. I don't feel like if somebody learns something from me, and if anybody's listening right now, reach out to me and tell me if I've ever actually taught you something versus something that you've learned from one of the guests, because I'd love to know that. But I don't feel that I teach. But
I think that's like the best teachers are the ones that don't, they just kind of drip the knowledge into your brain without forcing it there. You know what I mean? There's like little tidbits of knowledge that I've already picked up from you and just chatting.
You're too kind.
Recently. So yeah, everybody's a teacher in their own way.
So please explain this though, and I know you're not a clinical herbalist, but stinging nettle seed. Why the seed, and what properties are there that are trying to be utilized, and like kind of what for? I'm very curious because I've always heard like stinging nettle seed is super high in oxalates, right? Obviously the oxalates probably aren't going to get like absorb into the alcohol or fats that I've recently learned. But what's the purpose there?
So I have a really close friend. So I was going through I had a loss in my life a few months ago, and I was going through grief and trauma and allergies. And somehow all of those things led to stinging nettle tincture. And she kind of recommended certain extractions and tinctures for me. I feel like, Brianna or somebody would be a much better person to ask on the details. I was actually kind of somebody held my hand and led me to taking stinging nettle seed on a daily basis based on what I was dealing with at the time. So grief and somehow oddly allergies. But I just, again, I don't feel like I
Yeah,
can
no, I get it.
comfortable talking in depth about this when really my friend Blair is the one that has the deep knowledge and kind of led me to that
That's
direction.
interesting, though. I wonder what the properties. I'm gonna have to look into it now. I am going to research
Yeah,
it.
I am too, because you asked me that, and I'm like, and I take it
Well,
every
hey,
day. I
and
should
that's fine.
probably
I
have
take
better.
nettle tea, and I don't know what properties in that. I know it's anti-inflammatory, and then so I actually throw some mallow in there because the nettle itself will dry you out. These are things I've learned along
Oh
the way.
yeah,
So then you
yeah,
throw mallow in there, and now it's got something that
uh,
binds moisture. And
right.
then so I've been taking that quite a bit. But what I've noticed, I've got I took a fall not that long ago, and I didn't realize it at the time. I did more than just hurt my wrist, and I thought it was just my wrist. Well, I ended up messing up my knee, and so there's been like extra pain involved with that, and I'm probably going to have to get it operated on. But in the meantime, I'm like, since I've been taking the tea, there's less pain. It's weird. And it's actually, yeah. So I started thinking
Here's
about it.
how plant medicine actually
I
works.
know, it's crazy. And I'm like, it's the tea that I've been drinking every night. Finally, it, dawned on me. And I'm like, well, one, I'm like probably adding extra moisture to my body and like the joints and things are utilizing the mallow. And then the stinging nettle is, anti-inflammatory. And I'm like, oh, this is great. And I originally was just taking it because I wanted to help my allergies. But
And then I sometimes think that in addition to the literal benefits of plant medicine, it forces you to be present and pay attention to what you're feeling and how that changes over time. And that actually, not saying that's placebo, because I don't think it is, being present and listening to your body and being more aware of what you need is like a byproduct of getting into plant medicine, because you have to pay more attention to how you react to different tinctures and whatnot. So it's almost like a learning your body helps
yeah,
heal your body as well.
learning and listening. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then knowing, but then I feel like there's a deeper connection because the nettle is stuff that I picked. I didn't pick the mallow root, but the nettle, the goldenrod, all these different things, right? It's stuff that I have the connection with. And in fact, I talked about for the first time ever on the podcast is like the connection that you develop becomes a relationship and you truly understand these plants for the first time. It's not just a weed. It's not just, oh, hey, that's dandelion. It's, hey, dandelion has been in me. I know how it feels, what it affects. It becomes a actual relationship with that. And that's something that
Yeah.
most people probably never experience, but once you do, it's like, whoa, you just opened, hey plant, you just opened me up to this whole new world.
Yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
special.
And I'm sure
And
people
I, you
listening
know,
to this are going to think I'm nuts, but it's true. And the more time you spend in nature and you spend with these things, the more of a relationship you develop.
and I hope that as we continue to talk to more people, fewer people will think that you're nuts, because it's not
Right.
nuts.
No, no.
It makes a
It's
lot of sense.
so cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely awesome. It's been a journey. So relationships, because you talked about a little bit the fungi and like relationship with, so can you kind of go into that a little bit more in detail and then like maybe bridge it into wildlife and the relationship it has with the environment?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, everything is connected
Sure.
in any ecosystem. I know that's so cliche sounding, but so I work in forest ecosystems. They're largely conifer and hardwoods really, but it's, if you're a mushroom hunter or a forager of anything, it's easy to, because we've learned how to separate everything into these individual species and categorize everything, it's easy to go out and be like, I'm foraging for this one species today, and that's all I need to know about. But in reality, when you think about the interaction of that one species with the ecosystem, including wildlife, it becomes like, oh, well, I should probably learn about the entire plant association here. I should learn about all the trees, because that's gonna allow me to become a better forager. It's also going to be allow me to become a better steward of the species that I'm foraging. But yeah, so I think like, I was mentioning earlier, when I teach foraging classes, my goal is really to not only educate folks on what they can and cannot utilize medicinally and for food, but also what is the role of that species in this ecosystem, and how can we appreciate it without having to eat it? Because everybody's like, can I eat that species, can I eat it? And it's like, well, no, but it's doing amazing things for our forest, and we should thank it and be really excited about this one too, even though we can't eat it.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by overpriced wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I heard that for a limited time, all Mint Mobile wireless plans are $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they sell wireless service online. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
So yeah, I think I'm like on a mission to teach people fungi that you can't eat but are super cool. And one of the ways that I've found that works for me to do that is to link it to wildlife, because I study wildlife. So I do mostly study birds, but I also do other wildlife taxa. And I think it's really cool to connect the fungi with the wildlife species, with the trees, and just stand in a forest and look around. And it's just this giant cyclical situation where everything relies on each other in some way. It gets very complex, to the point where I don't think we understand most of what's going on. But yeah, I don't know. I can give some specific
well,
example.
yeah, sure. But so it's balance, right? Like everything exists together and it's balance. And what's crazy is we don't realize most of the time we're the ones who screw up the balance. Some things are cyclical to where they'll have waves, right? And they go through phases to where sometimes there's highs and lows of certain things, but other than that, there's balance. It's perfect balance, and I don't care.
Well, highs and lows are part of the balance.
Right.
Yes. It's a dynamic balance.
For sure. But so like, and people don't understand that, and like, oh, well, something's happening to this, and it's like a knee-jerk reaction when they don't realize that no, this happens, and there's reason, but. I get what you're saying.
Fire.
Yeah,
with fire out here, the inclination is to think, oh, this is tragic. I mean, and sometimes they are tragic in some ways. If human lives or structures are lost, but setting an entire patch of a forest burning down, in an area where that is expected to happen is actually required for some species to regenerate. So like, we've got lodgepole pine out here. They require these high severity fires. So that dynamic nature of it and those stark changes, we've learned to be averse to them because we don't understand them. But I think we're relearning that like in certain areas, we need that to happen to set the forest back to the beginning. And it looks really sad, and it is sad, but that's what needs to happen in order for biodiversity to be maintained at some level. And it's a constant learning process for
and then
humans.
More browse for the animals, and it's just it's awesome though. But so what was some specifics you were thinking of? Is there anything in particular, any type of fungi that really plays a relationship with something?
There's two fun ones that I like to bring up. So in Oregon, we have flying squirrels, And we have so they nest in tree canopies, so they are utilizing conifer trees to reproduce, and they love eating fungi. They love eating false truffles like rhizopogon, which are, they look like white truffles, but they're not. They fruit underground. And these flying squirrels have a really good sense of smell for these false truffles. They'll dig them up once so the false truffle will emit these smell compounds once the spores are mature, which is an evolutionary adaptation with the squirrel, which is wild. Like the fungi has learned that it should not emit smell compounds before the spores are mature, because then it
won't survive. It won't fruit, right? Yeah.
So it waits, and then it starts emitting smell compounds, and the squirrels key into that, and they are really good at finding them. And their digestive system actually allows the spores to pass through and still be viable. And that doesn't happen with all wildlife. It is. It's wild stuff. Like when you think about how this all happened, how we got here, it's wild. But so the squirrels I just kind of picture like little flying squirrels flying through the tree canopies, tree to tree, just pooping out rhizopogon spores everywhere. And so they're spreading the rhizopogon spores to much farther distances than would ever happen otherwise. And so that's a mutualistic relationship between the squirrel and the fungus. But then the rhizopogon is a mycorrhizal fungi or fungal species with conifers. So the squirrel is benefiting from the tree by nesting in the tree, but the trees are benefiting from the squirrels by having them around, because they're spreading the spores of the fungal species that helps the tree obtain more water and nutrients. So it's this beautiful triangle of mutualism. And I mean, there's a lot of nuance and complexity within that, but it's that is a pattern that repeats itself over and over in nature. And of course there are other patterns like parasitism and whatnot, different strategies, but it's just so fascinating to look at that and see how nature is.
The fact that they're pooping out and spreading a mushroom that helps preserve their home, like, yeah, pretty cool.
It's amazing. Yeah, so that's a fun one. My second another favorite one to share is that woodpecker species, actually we're finding that they are acting as wood decay fungi dispersers. So woodpeckers are cavity excavators. They nest in cavities in trees, usually dead trees, and they can't get into the wood if it's fully sound. There needs to be some sort of wood decay fungi in there that is already breaking down the lignin, starting to decay the wood, so that because like the woodpecker bill is pretty strong, but it's not that strong. So they need some sort of fungus to come in, inoculate the tree, start breaking down that wood structure before they can actually excavate their nests. And it just so happens that in several studies on different species of woodpeckers, they're actually carrying fungal spores of those wood decay fungi on their feet, on their bellies, when they move from tree to tree. So they're actually inoculating other trees with these wood decay fungi that will help future woodpeckers or them in future years to decay that tree. So there's a mutualism with the wood decay fungi and the bird. And there's a lot of different theories on how that happens. There's one study that showed that it could be UV related, where certain fungal mycelium in a tree, the bird can actually see that, and that's how it decides to start excavating a cavity in that specific tree. And then it'll get its spores all over it, and it'll go to another tree to feed and inoculate that tree.
That's pretty cool.
So they're actually like ecosystem engineers in that way, where they're facilitating tree death or tree decay, and snag production. Snags are just standing dead trees essentially, but that's an important role that they're playing, because dead wood is important for loads of other species. So they're like a keystone species / ecosystem engineer. So, and I mean, this is a new science, new finding. It could be all woodpecker species. I'm assuming it is. I actually want to start studying this, so we'll see. I keep planting the seed with my supervisor, like, hey, we should check out our woodpeckers here, and I want to capture them and swab their bellies and do a DNA analysis of the fungal species on them. So maybe next year, we'll see.
That's pretty cool. No, I just learned about the ash borer beetle and the fact that it's not actually the ash borer beetle that's killing the tree. It's some type of fungus or some type of bacteria that's on the beetle that's killing the tree, which I was like, what? Wait a minute. Here this whole time I'm like, oh, these beetles are killing the tree, and it's not the beetle. It's what's on the beetle. But yeah.
And that's a mutualism too between those two. That's actually like a somewhat, I don't want to say common, but that's something that repeats itself in nature with bacteria or fungal pathogens. They can't just get into the heartwood of a tree or the cambium of a tree. So they have this, this mutualism with different insects, wood-boring beetles, whatever. And it's mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I've actually been working on clearing out all the dead ash that looks dangerous standing right now around my house.
Have live ash out there?
Not many. No, there are some, but they're pretty rare right now. Yeah, and within the past, I don't know, I'm trying to think. So I've been here like 8-9 years, and there was quite a few live ones then that are now all dead standing. But I know of some places where there still is some ash trees that, like I go hunting on the properties and stuff that are public ground, that there's still ash trees, just not very many.
Yeah, and I wonder if those, I would imagine or hope that there's some effort to find resistant ash trees somewhere. And I wonder if folks who have ash trees are keyed into that or not. Probably not. But we just had our first emerald ash borer sighting in Oregon maybe 2 months ago. And we have the Oregon ash out here. So I don't know that it's as widespread and prevalent as east of the Rockies, but it's a major part of our riparian zones. And so everybody out here is kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
This is a new issue for us out here.
They've still got the beetle traps everywhere on the trees, to try and see and catch them and figure things out. But you don't see as many of them anymore. So maybe they've concluded their studies. I don't know. We'll have to find out. Now it's going to be some more research, some more digging. But so one of the things I've noticed and I've seen is you do some foraging on a golf course.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me about that. Do you just sneak onto the golf course all stealth-like ninja mode or what? What's the...
At first, yes, I did. And then I lived right by the golf course and walked my dog at the golf course and started noticing that there were remnant, plums and pears and apple trees from properties that were there prior to them turning it into a golf course. And yeah, I would sneak around at first and bring a backpack and kind of stuff all the plums into my bag. But at some point, the groundskeeper folks came up to me, and I remember being like, oh boy, like I knew I wasn't going to get in serious trouble or anything, but the groundskeeper, I remember he was actually happy to have me there because they had to clean up all the fallen fruit. And so he was like, please take everything. Nice. Tell everybody, come out and take it all, because otherwise we have to clean it up. And so at that point, I actually talked to him about their use of, pesticides, fungicides, and all that, because I was wondering, but wasn't, it was, a little bit of a
back of the mind gray area thing.
Yeah. And they knew that people foraged there. And so these trees are kind of they're not right in the golf course area. They're on the border and the forested area. So they didn't spray there. And so I then just had this wonderful conversation with this person, which is so, it's just kind of like a metaphor about how we should handle these types of situations instead of like sneaking around and hiding. Why not just have a conversation with somebody?
Right.
And then in this case, it was a win-win. I definitely knock on people's doors now too if they have like a magnolia tree in their front yard and I want to harvest the magnolia buds. I'll just straight up be that weirdo who knocks on your door and is like, "Can I bring a ladder and harvest your magnolia buds, please?" And people just look at me like, what do you want to do? But I think, yeah, foraging in urban spaces is something that's becoming more accepted slowly. I think Alexis Nicole, Black Forager, is helping to bring that acceptance to utilizing urban spaces. And Tim, too, MN Forager, they're both doing a great job of that. I think we're, it's such an underutilized space. Golf courses specifically usually have a lot of chemicals on them. So I think it's good to keep that in mind and talk to the people about what they're spraying and when. But yeah, there's so much space in suburbs and urban landscapes that have so much food that are just really underutilized.
So, so now you have permission, you talk to the person, he's like, tell all your friends. Did you ever like post it on like fallingfruit.org or anything like that?
I didn't actually post it on fallingfruit.org because I didn't know about it at the time. And then I kind of forgot about that website until
I'll still look at it, but it doesn't get updated very often.
Yeah, I think people just don't think I mean, personally, I forget about it, but I've posted it to Instagram. I've said, hey, if anybody's willing to drive to this town, I can tell you where to get plums and figs because I can't harvest them all and they're going to go to waste otherwise. So I do actually have several friends that go harvest from the golf course now.
So one of the things you mentioned was the figs. And so what do you do with all the figs?
Well, aside from eating them as is, I dehydrate a lot of them and use them for backpacking and whatnot. Like the high sugar content is good for that. But I actually last year I started experimenting with figs more and I harvested a bunch of unripe figs and put them in a fig leaf. So I made fig leaf syrup, which is essentially boiling fig leaves and then adding sugar, and it oddly smells like coconuts. You walk into the house and it's like, oh, I'm in a tropical place or something. It's really beautiful. And then I preserved these unripe figs in this fig leaf syrup, and I might have gotten this idea from Alan Burgo, but I can't remember. And they're phenomenal. Or no, it was Pascal who I got it from. But so now this year I harvested loads of unripe figs and it's just a whole new way to utilize that. So these are just kind of a snacking fig. You can make a dessert out of them, but I dehydrate tons. I've got like gallon glass jars and use them for hiking and whatnot.
So I planted a fig tree this year and it was just, pretty much bare root, and it took off and had leaves on it. And I was like, huh, okay. And then all of a sudden it had all these fruits on it and I didn't do anything with them because they were unripe. And then I was like, oh, the frost is going to kill them. They're not going to develop. Now that I know this, next year, maybe, even though the tree will be bigger then and probably have ripe fruit. And then I saw you and I asked you, I was like, fig leaf syrup, what is that? I think I questioned that and DM'd you on Instagram, but like, so you simply take the leaves, put them in water with X amount of sugar, boil it for X amount of time, and then it imparts flavor and
that's it. And as it's boiling, those volatile compounds start coming out of the leaves, and it is like maple syrup, coconut. It's very tropical. It's kind of amazing. And then that fig leaf syrup you can use any for baking as you would maple syrup on pancakes, whatever. It's super good. I don't eat a lot of honey and maple syrup, so I made a big batch of it and then ended up having to gift it to people because it was just sitting in my fridge.
Actually, I have three pints left of maple syrup that I made that I'm super
Well, now you
excited
got to
about.
make fig leaf syrup next year.
I guess so. Yeah, if my tree doesn't die, Clay Bauer says that it may die and it'll have to be cut back because even though it's a Chicago hardy fig, this is what I've heard. And he says, even though it says it's Chicago hardy fig, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to produce fruit and grow and be bountiful. He's like, you might have to wrap it. So
it's going to be a tease.
Yeah, it's going to be a tease is what he's telling me. And now I'm disappointed. But he says I could maybe burlap wrap it and prevent it from, getting too cold and helping it out. We'll see. I don't know. I'm going to let it go the first couple of years and just see. What's that?
I'm rooting for your fig tree.
Me too.
I hope that it thrives, and even if you don't get fruit, you'll have fig leaves to make fig leaf syrup with.
Absolutely, because it sounds cool. I'm interested. So does the coconut and all those different flavors, do they stay within the syrup or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's pretty cool.
They sure do.
And then it's good. Do you bottle it or put it, like, can it in little jars, or what do you do?
Yeah, I pressure canned it in little jars. Because I get a little weird about if you're doing something in a vinegar brine, it feels safer, but to just have in your fridge for a while. But with it's a sugar syrup, and that, I don't know, it just kind of freaks me out in terms of food safety. So I
the one thing I'll say is, like, my wife cans a lot. Like, when we first got together, the only thing she ever really canned was like jam. And then I'd like probably burned her out on it until kids, but then she was like, I'm not going to the store and buying jelly. I'll just make jam.
Right.
So now, like, she makes all of our jam that we eat. I don't eat that much, but the kids love it. Peanut butter and jellies all the time. But it's, all jam from either strawberries that we grew or somebody else grew or she buys, but then, mulberries and different things like that too. The kids don't seem to care for the mulberry jam that much, but I like it. But it's just sugar. I mean, that's all it is, right? And it's pretty freaking shelf stable, and you're just boiling it. And then, like, some of them she doesn't even water bath. Like, if she knows it's going to be utilized within like 4 or 5 months, it's just hot packing, just making sure everything's clean. And
yeah,
sugar. It's crazy.
I think it's just like I don't do jams and jellies and syrups much, so I think it's more of like a unfamiliarity.
Yeah.
When people aren't familiar with something, it can be fearful, just like foraging.
Right.
So maybe some feel more confident.
My fearful thing right now is like fermentation. I am having all kinds of, I feel like, problems with it. I don't even know.
I've been there. I used to be that, and I got over the hump, and now I just don't even care anymore. So maybe I'll get there with the sugary thing.
Let me ask you this then, and I know maybe you're not an expert or whatever, culinary expert, but so one of my, I don't think any of them actually fully fermented. Like, I don't even know if it started the process, and maybe it's too cold. Like, I had them in my basement. I moved them upstairs. But I don't see bubbles. One of them I took and like sampled, but then I noticed, so some of the stuff floated past the weight and it like got a little bit of white mold. I scooped that stuff out and I was like, the rest is probably fine. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to get freaked out by stuff floating on top because you hear, you got to scoop it out every day. And I used to be concerned about that, but, I don't think it's that big of a deal anymore. I think that the telling part for me is the way it smells. If it's that good funky smell, even if you had some mold in it or still have some floaties, or if it's yeast heavy, it's been fine for me. The few times that things have gone wrong, it's been very obvious based on the smell, and I fish stuff out from the top all the time and just let it keep going. And I'm here talking to you right now.
Yeah. So what's weird though is, like, it tasted briny, which is normal, right? But there wasn't the fermentation. It wasn't like softened. It didn't have like the, I don't know, the fermented taste to it. Like I don't know. It was weird. It wasn't like sour.
What were you doing? Was it produce from the store? Was it wild forage stuff? What was it?
It was cabbage that I had from my garden, and I just rinsed it off lightly. The outer layers, obviously, you're not going to do the inner layers. Food processed it, so it was chopped up really good, and packed it in a jar. maybe I packed it too tight. I don't know. And then I just poured my brine over it, which was like, I think 2.5 tablespoons or whatever it called for, the recipe to whatever, to a quart or pint. I don't know, whatever. I followed the recipe, but.
So I think that, it should have had enough wild yeast on it coming from your garden for sure. I think that I started, do you do so you're following a recipe as opposed to doing it by weight, like salt content by weight?
I didn't do it by weight.
Yeah, so that I would recommend, do you have a kitchen scale?
Of course.
Yeah, I would recommend just doing like a 2% to 2.3% salt content by weight of what you're using. And it sounds like maybe you didn't have a high enough salt content, or you had too high of a salt content. Because if you don't have a high enough salt content, then something that you don't want to grow might grow, and then it will outcompete the good bacteria. Or if you have too high of a salt content, it's inhospitable to the good bacteria. So yeah, I would definitely recommend weighing it all out, doing a little simple math, and making sure you have that 2 to 2.1, 2.2% salt content.
Yeah, because I think I just followed the ball canning, whatever they told me, and I think they failed me because it just tastes briny. That's it. I don't think it's ever happened. It makes me sad.
Yeah. I think there's just, like you said, you pack the jar tight. So the weight of what you had could be very different than somebody else. And so I think it's weigh it out and do another experiment with your garden cabbage, and I'm sure it'll work.
It's ruined. It's ruined. It's ruined.
Well, I don't think it's ruined. I think it just wasn't full, fermented in the way.
But what I'm saying is now there's nothing. It's done, right? Like, what am I going to do with it?
You've got pickled or salt brined cabbage.
Salt brined cabbage, yeah.
Yeah. Which could still be good.
Yeah, I guess. So I got to ask you, what's your favorite mushroom then to actually go after? Because I feel like mine has drastically changed.
Yeah. So I have a hard, like everybody, I have a hard time picking one, but this year it was really fun to key into mountain natural morels and spring porcini. I in past years have had friends who are really good at finding those, and so I go out with other people to their spots and pick up on the knowledge from them. But this year I really took it upon myself to do it on my own and found my own spots, and so that was super rewarding. But of course, this fall now chanterelles are easy out here, but we have our fall porcini just starting to pop up. So same deal. I've been going out with a group of people, and I still do go out with them, but I'm really taking it upon myself now to find new spots and really step up my own game and challenge myself. So yeah, currently those king boletes, but this spring was really fun. I spent a lot of time, just a lot of miles walked, a lot of failed attempts, and I learned a lot, and I feel really good about it.
See, so like you guys have the burn morels, so that I'm guessing when you say mountain natural morels, you're talking about the ones that aren't the burn morels, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's all we have, but I feel like they're fairly easy to find, and competition is very fierce. So I've migrated away from that, and I'm like, not so much anymore. And when I eat them, I'm like, meh. I don't know. I've just gotten past not burn morels.
Burn morels or mountain naturals?
We only have natural morels. So we don't have burn morels,
and you
really.
Think
they're meh. It's okay, right? So my new thing, and I've always liked them, but now have like a new grown appreciation for them, is hen of the woods. So like that's just my new thing that I'm love. And I feel like chanterelles, they like hard to find, I guess, but once you find them, it's like boom. Everywhere, right? They're just, it's not like you're gonna find one or two. You're gonna find, or at least in my experience, you're gonna find like 50 of them, and then you walk, a couple hundred yards, and you're like, oh whoa, there's a whole bunch more of them. So like, there's not like the mystique, like there is for me. I don't know, but like I also know what's cool is like early hunting season, deer season. If I don't get a deer, a lot of the properties I'm hunting, there's some beautiful old oaks. and I know I'm going to come home with some mushrooms. So it's like, just makes it that much more special for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you can always find something. Yeah, chanterelles out here are kind of easy. They're abundant. I mean, at least in Western Oregon where it's wet, the forest, moist forest where I'm at. If you go over the Cascade Crest, then it becomes much more difficult and rare almost, but you could just go anywhere in Doug Fir Forest here and find chanterelles. So, and I love chanterelles. They're delicious and I harvest them, but there's not a challenge there. It's kind of like, um, I need chanterelles today. I know that I can go to the spot and get some versus, other species where it takes more effort. That's a little bit more fun nowadays.
Yeah. And so my new thing is trying to find shrimps, and I haven't been successful. My buddy's got a spot that I don't go with them. And I think I'm going to have to listen, I'm going, we're going to get these just so I can get the experience of, because I feel like sometimes once you find them with somebody and you're like, oh, and you're digging in the dirt and you realize like your surroundings and what's around you, you get that feel. And then when you're out on your own, you're like, this feels right. This is the spot. I'm going to find them here. Yeah. So that's when I'm going to try and work on them, next year, next fall, early fall, and try and do so.
That feeling that's definitely a thing. And so when I take people out, I try to teach them like, what is that feeling? You're getting that feeling because you're in a space that has these certain structural and compositional elements. And so like, how can we define that and write it down? But it's not always definable. Sometimes you just know, and it's the same species. And, if you read your notes, it would be the same thing, but like, there's something about that space that you just know is a good space.
I get it. I get it. Or decomposing pine needles and you smell it and it's like on the edge of oaks at the same time, like that transition line, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, what's this? Oh, it's a wood bluet. Like from that certain thing, you pick up on, I don't know, you just pick up on things like that, and what's weird is your brain fills in that gap because it's been there before, it's familiar, and you don't even realize it until eventually you do realize it. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
It's pretty cool.
And I love that because while it's great to be able to define some things, it's really necessary for us to not have an answer to everything and to just go with our intuition with a lot of this.
Yeah. So it's been awesome talking to you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing with me and the guests. But before we go, if somebody wants to, if they live in the PNW and maybe they want to take a class with you or something like that, where can they find you, reach out to you, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I am active on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Lorelle Morel. I do have a website. It's lorellemorel.com. There's a link to emailing me on there, but I am very active on Instagram, so I would recommend finding me on there if you have any questions or want to reach out. That would be the avenue.
Okay. And once again, Lorelle, it's been fun. I appreciate it, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.